I know. You just want to get it over with. Why not just get the coronavirus and you'll be done, presuming you recover? First off, there is more to the coronavirus than just lung damage. Children may get an inflammatory response that is life-threatening. China, which has had this virus for longer, is now saying there may be long-term heart damage as well. No bueno, as my friend would say. Well, we're sick and tired of it. Can the government just restore things back to normal? We talked about how if we reopen, people are at higher risk for getting it. There'll be more deaths, but yes, let's talk about the countries that have gotten over it. This is Guangzhou, China. My friend lives here. This was just taken yesterday. The crowds are back to where you have no room to move. That's called normal. How did the countries get here? What price did they pay for their success? Let's investigate. China, Wuhan. This is where it all started. January 23rd was when they put it under quarantine. All public transit was shut down. Buses, trains, ferries. No planes at the airport were allowed to fly. The next day, car travel was limited. Basically, nobody went in or out. You may not have heard of Wuhan, but it's not a small place, with a population of 11 million. By comparison, New York City is only at 8 million. Later, the neighboring cities were locked down as well, so after a week, a total of 50 million people were locked down. That's more than the population of California. In terms of timing, can you imagine people can't make it home for Christmas? Well, Chinese New Year is like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's all combined into one. It's the one time of the year when migrant workers can go home. 250 million people travel. Here's Guangzhou train station. When one winter trains were canceled or delayed, 500,000 people were stuck here. And a quarantine there wasn't a joke. If you tested positive, you don't get to stay at home. You get brought out to a facility. You have no choice to remain at home. There's videos of people welding doors shut. I'm not sure how true that is. But to give you a better glimpse of what happened, let me read you some thoughts from somebody who was quarantined in Beijing, a place not as badly hit. Someone now takes my temperature not only when I enter my own apartment building, but also when I enter every shop and restaurant, my office, and on certain commercial roads. Security guards check entry cards at every apartment building and narrow entrance lane, making it difficult to invite in friends or guests. Mask wearing quickly became universal. In a public park, I furtively took off my mask when I saw no staff around. Speakers on a ranger's car then came to life, blaring at me to put it back on. It required anyone who entered Beijing to self-quarantine for 14 days, enforced by the new residential security guards. Anyone who returned from outside the city might have a sticker posted on their apartment implicitly encouraging neighbors to check on them that they weren't out or about. 76 days. It was finally lifted April 8th. But even reopening, Wuhan had a stricter quarantine than the US quarantine. You need temperature checks wherever you go. You need a QR code to go anywhere. What is this QR code? It's an app that gives you a green, yellow, or a red. Green meaning you're clear, yellow meaning you might have it, and red meaning you have it. It's not an immunity card. There's no basis on actual testing. It isn't even simple contact tracing. Supposedly, the apps rely on a combination of self-reporting by user and government information, including a person's medical records, their travel history, and if they have been in contact with someone diagnosed with COVID-19. But nobody actually knows how you get your color: red, green, or yellow. If you're a foreigner, supposedly the Beijing Health Kit is a wonderful app. You don't have a birth certificate, so you can't use the app Chinese people use. Now it enables you to have a QR code so you could travel as well. But one day, all the foreigners in Beijing had yellows, meaning home observation, which is not a joke. Officials in some area installed alarms and put security tape on front doors to ensure they're not opened. I read somewhere that they said it was a technical error and it was fixed. But what about that? What if they didn't fix it? I have a friend in China, she's Chinese, and she's trying to travel with a foreigner. They're going to a famous mountain called Huangshan. She's going from Guangzhou, the map on the left. He's going from Suzhou, the map on the right. Which journey do you think is easier? The non-Chinese person's? Wrong. His QR code doesn't work. He can't buy a ticket. She had to call the authorities and they said, yes, his code doesn't work. You need to do this, this, and that. And if she didn't do this, he wouldn't be able to go anywhere in China, not even to the next province over. Okay, you get it. China had a very strict quarantine policy. It still has a lot of movement restrictions. But what about a Western country, somewhere like New Zealand? They beat it. Why can't we be like them? It's always so easy to read success stories, but many of the time you miss the backstory, all the hard work and suffering that went behind the success. New Zealand's is no different. In the past, I've heard it described as draconian. Now I know why. There was no advance notice. On March 19th, the borders were closed. On Monday, March 23, the alert was raised to level 3. And she announced on Monday as well that Wednesday, 2 days later, the alert would be raised to level 4, the highest. I was confused when I read this headline. After freed from the lockdown, they went to get fast food? Why would you want to get fast food? Oh, you mean it wasn't open? Yup, no restaurants. And of course the beaches were closed. It wasn't like in California when the governor saw everybody on the beaches and then closed it. They were closed from the start. Let's look at the restrictions. They use the same word essential as California and many other places. But if you want to look to see how strict they are, let me give you some examples. Driving. My friend from New Zealand says that in the beginning, police were watching for people in their cars. If you had more than one person, they'll pull you over. Where are you going? Going to the store? Nope, you don't need 2 people. Ticket. Butchers, bakers, fruit shops, closed. Smaller stores allowed 1 customer at a time, literally. No takeaways, meaning no drive-thrus. You want fast food? Well, maybe you'll get it from a gas station. But I'd say if you're willing to eat that, yeah, it must be essential. You must be starving. Playing ball exercise? Here you don't worry about, if you pass somebody on the way to a hiking trail. There, they mean it. Your neighbor cannot even pick up your ball to throw it back. And so yes, they were very successful in limiting coronavirus, but what about now? Well, you have to keep the virus out. China has a 5-1 policy that most people in the US don't know about, but they say every airline gets 1 international flight per week to a country. So foreign airline gets 1 flight a week to China. What does that mean? Well, they already banned non-citizens. It means Chinese people can't even get back to China. So they're closing their borders to their own citizens in a somewhat devious way. The logic behind once you got clean, you can't associate with unclean people, right? They'll bring it into your country. They're your brother, sister, countrymen. Too bad. This is one man's journey back to China from California. He flew from San Francisco to Atlanta on Delta, Atlanta to Paris on Air France, Paris to Minsk to Stockholm on Belarusian, finally Stockholm to Beijing on Air China. And he considered himself lucky for being able to make it back. And you can bet this wasn't on 1 ticket. So coming back to the US, you think we would have been able to quarantine for so long with such a strict quarantine, like 76 days for Wuhan? Most recruits can't even get through basic training, the key term being basic. New Zealand reopened after 50 days, but neither New Zealand nor China are back to normal. China has their QR code screening. They have pervasive monitoring of temperatures. New Zealand's still in alert level 2 with social gatherings limited to 10. They say numbers speak for themselves, so let's look at the results in the US. The number of new cases generally is coming down. Deaths also coming down. Of course, if you compare to China, it's not as flat. New Zealand just has sort of dropped off the curve, the new term being squashing the curve. But if you think about how we enjoyed ourselves while other countries were in strict quarantine, taking advantage of all the food deals, gaining the quarantine 15, for a country that hasn't actually put in a lot of effort, our results aren't too bad for how little we put in. Let me finish off with a quote from this guy. Here he was vacationing in Intermarian on his mega yacht. I think you could over-worship and mythologize the idea of working extremely hard. For my particular makeup, it really is true that I didn't believe in weekends. I didn't believe in vacations. I mean, I knew everybody's license plate, so I could tell you over the last month when their car had come in and gone from the parking lot. So I don't recommend it. I don't think most people will enjoy it. Do you think he just happened to make it work? Do you doubt that Bill Gates worked hard? Success looks easy, but it's not. If we're not willing to put in the work, we just have to accept our results.